Hey guys, and welcome into episode 7 of Directed by Steven Spielberg. I hope you're all enjoying this series so far. This is sort of a passion project for me, but it's been an absolute joy to revisit these absolute classics. And speaking of classics, today's film definitely meets that definition, and that film is the 1982 sci-fi E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. Of the 7 Spielberg films I've covered so far, E.T. is definitely the one that I've watched the most throughout my childhood. It was a film that I was definitely obsessed with, and I absolutely love it still to this day. Similar to Close Encounters, E.T. was another personal film for Spielberg for a number of reasons, which we're going to cover today, whilst also reviewing and analysing this masterpiece. So strap yourselves in and let's go for a ride with our favourite friendly little alien. E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial is the story of an alien stuck on Earth that befriends a young boy named Elliot. They form an unbreakable bond whilst they work to return him to his home planet. It's a simple story told from the incredibly powerful perspective of a child. But E.T. is more than just a story of a young boy's friendship with an alien. It's a story about dealing with grief and how a child processes trauma in the most abstract of ways. We'll come back to that a little later, but for now, let's break down this cinematic masterpiece, starting conveniently at the very beginning. The film starts with an alien spaceship arriving to Earth, landing in a forest in the San Fernando Valley. Within seconds, we're immediately greeted by a familiar Spielberg technique: concealment. From the get-go, the aliens are concealed by darkness, showing little more than their silhouettes as they strut about the forest. Also concealed are the agents who arrive at the scene, attempting to catch the aliens. They are concealed differently, however, by not showing anything above their waist. This particular technique would be used to great effect throughout the film and was concocted by Spielberg as a way to create fear around the adults in the film, to show that sharp contrast of size that an adult has compared to a child. Much of the film, in fact, is shot from a lower camera angle to thoroughly convey the perspective of a child. As a result of the raid, E.T. is left behind by his fellow aliens stranded on a foreign planet. We're then introduced to the Taylor family and our main character, Elliot, a young boy with a wild imagination amongst a family reeling from their father recently leaving them. The inter-family dynamics are expertly and efficiently conveyed in one scene at the dinner table, ascribing character traits to each, whilst also showing the current fragile state of their family. Elliot encounters a mysterious creature in his backyard that none of his family believes he saw, prompting him to find the creature. This might very well be my favourite scene of the film, as it combines all of the best aspects of Spielberg all into one. You have concealment once again, disguising E.T. through shadows and silhouettes, slowly unveiling more of his appearance as the scene progresses. You also have the Spielberg light in full effect, emitting those glorious rays of light to set the mood. This is an example, however, of the Spielberg lights being used for more ominous effect, similar to Close Encounters. Then you also have the zoom-in close-up, showing the expression on Elliot's face to convey wonder and fear. When I re-watch this scene, it's actually quite terrifying to behold, especially if you have no context for E.T.'s true nature. His creepy silhouette, unnerving sounds, even the way he bustles. It's quite unsettling if you think about it. But it's truly masterful how Spielberg is able to slowly pull back the fear, measured by Elliot's demeanor changing from fear to curiosity as he leads E.T. into the house. I think it's worth noting that Spielberg utilizes the best aspects of his 2 best films to this point, Jaws and Raiders of the Lost Ark, to, in my opinion, create the perfect character introduction. If you recall with Jaws, he withheld his main draw card, the shark, for the first hour of the film in order to build the intrigue. Meanwhile, in Raiders, he draws out the introduction of Indy through a prolonged intro that also builds intrigue. The common trait is concealment, and here with E.T., Spielberg has introduced E.T. relatively early in the film, similar to Raiders, whilst also concealing him for as long as possible, just like Jaws, allowing for ample fear and mystery to build around the character before revealing his true peaceful innocence. Note the waist-high camera angle too, reinforcing that childlike perspective of the events. It's here that Elliot begins to form a bond with E.T., highlighted by the yawn that E.T. mimics. He introduces E.T. to his siblings to contrasting reactions. Elliot and E.T.'s relationship continues to grow to the point when it becomes clear that their fates are tied, proving problematic as E.T.'s health starts to deteriorate, as does Elliot's. As the children pull out all the stops to keep E.T.'s existence hidden from the public, you have the mysterious agent figures who are tracking E.T.'s location. leading them to Elliot's house. Elliot disguises E.T. for Halloween so that he can take him to the forest where he was left, along with the device E.T. has created to contact his kind. This leads to one of the most iconic shots in the history of cinema and perhaps the defining image of Spielberg's career. I'm speaking, of course, about the shot of E.T. and Elliot on the bike, their silhouettes flying past the bright, shining moon. Talk about a money shot. It inspires wonder in the most amazing ways. A promise of infinite imagination for any child who ever dreamed of more. To me, it sums up everything Spielberg ever dreamed of himself as a child and now a grown filmmaker. A child flying on a bike with an alien companion just about sums up the imagination of any wondrous child. It's escapism in the most literal and figurative sense imaginable. And let's not forget that incredible John Williams score either. A sweeping melody filled with childlike wonder that beautifully complements that imagery. It's no wonder Spielberg made this moment the logo of his production company, Amblin Entertainment. A classic moment in the history of cinema. As E.T. and Elliot's health reach a critical low, we get possibly the most frightening scene of the film, with the men in astronaut suits invading Elliot's home to find E.T. The imagery is truly terrifying and aided by the light saturation coming through the windows. Agents are still concealed, maintaining that aura of fear that Spielberg has built around them throughout the film. We then get that unforgettably ominous shot of the masked men marching up the road with that imposing sunset in the background. It's an interesting use of imagery, as sunsets have typically been used for positive effect in Spielberg's films to this point, yet here it's used in a menacing way. It is meant to symbolize the overbearing, unavoidable power that is government. It's well worth noting that to this point, no adult face has been shown in the film, apart from Elliot's mother, Mary. Even a seemingly innocent figure like Elliot's teacher is not shown in an earlier scene. It might not seem like anything, but it can't be understated what this creative choice does to help emphasize the greater themes in the film. These are intentional choices by Spielberg to create that separation of power between children and adults, emphasizing the fear that adult authority imposes on children. As an audience member, we feel greater fear for E.T. being caught because of these setups. With that said, moments later we finally get to see the faces of the government workers, and almost immediately all the fear is sucked out of the film. This is as intentional as removing a scary mask to show a child that there is nothing to fear. The adults are no longer imposing, but rather caring, sympathetic, and helpful to E.T. and Elliot. It's a bait and switch of sorts, but in the best possible way. As E.T. dies on the hospital bed, it's clear at this point that this is easily Spielberg's most emotional film at this point in his career. The screams from Elliot alone are enough to bring tears to your eyes. Tears of sadness quickly turn to tears of joy, however, as E.T. is seemingly resurrected through the love that Elliot had professed to his corpse. It shows in that moment that they were joined by more than just minds, but hearts as well. Elliot and his brother Michael steal a van, along with E.T., and a chase ensues that includes Michael's friends on bicycles. The police are in pursuit, and just as all hope seems lost, E.T. saves the day, guiding their bikes over the barricade, flying off towards the forest in front of a red sunset, contrasting the earlier shot. When they arrive, E.T.'s family returns on the same spaceship seen at the beginning of the film. He commences his goodbyes, one by one, finally bidding farewell to Elliot as the music swells and the emotions rise. And there the ultimate message of the film is conveyed, when E.T. says he'll be right there, pointing at Elliot with his finger alight. It's truly poetic that they would literally share experiences throughout the film, but the one thing that will always connect them is their love for one another. Despite the sadness of E.T.'s departure, the circumstances are ultimately positive as he is returned to his family and his home. The end. This brings me now to the crux of E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial and what it represents at its core. E.T. is about dealing with grief and seeking closure. You have a family at the beginning, dealing with the collective grief of their father abandoning them. You have a mother whose mind is so scattered that she is completely oblivious to E.T.'s presence. You have an older brother who kills time with his idiot friends. A younger sister who is too young to properly understand the situation. But then you have Elliot, a young boy with a wild imagination who befriends an alien. In fact, he relies on his imagination to deal with his father's absence, and so when a seemingly impossible creature arrives at his doorstep, he welcomes him with open arms and bares his heart and soul to him. He is essentially filling the void of love left by his father, and so When E.T. leaves at the end, he does so with Elliot now having received the closure of getting a proper goodbye. While some consider Close Encounters to be Spielberg's most personal film, I personally believe E.T. is more personal to him as it speaks more to that childlike wonder that Spielberg possesses. Not only that, but it deals with an explicitly fatherless home, which is something that he very much lived in his youth with his father regularly on the road for work. To me, E.T. is Spielberg's magnum opus, and if there's one film he should be defined by, it's E.T. Everything he has learned and gained in his filmmaking career to this point is on display in this film and is perfected in a storytelling masterclass. So there you have it. That is E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial, and that is the 7th edition in the Steven Spielberg filmography. What an incredible film on all fronts. I mean, it's one thing to make a film as damn near perfect as Raiders of the Lost Ark, but it's another thing to come along a year later and arguably make an even better film in the form of E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. And to me, that is exactly what E.T. is, and therefore I am giving a 9.5 out of 10 to E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. This puts it in first place, replacing Raiders of the Lost Ark as my new number 1 in the current films of Steven Spielberg's filmography. Will it continue to hold that title? Stay tuned as the next episode focuses on another classic, and that is the 1984 prequel Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. I'm looking forward to that, and I hope you are too. I thank you all very much for watching, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.